Throughout this podcast, sensitive subjects such as sexual assaults and suicidal thoughts will be mentioned. Listener discretion is advised. All right, welcome back to Don't Waste This Effing Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner. And don't be afraid of this title. When I say we're done, let me explain what that means. I know if you're following the Facebook group or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, you have seen that I said I was going to do some sort of political deep dive episode. After all of the interest in this story, I thought it would be a good thing to kind of dive deeper into Megan's experiences with both the Republican and Democratic parties, as well as her scams of small business owners. I think I explained the gist of what she did throughout the podcast, kind of the pattern of behavior, but there are so many other stories and so many others who want to share their experiences that I felt, why not give these people a platform? But then two things happened. The first, and this is my fault, but going after, trying to get some of these politicos to speak around most state inaugurations and national inauguration, probably not the best call. But also, a lot of people in politics, both Republican and Democrat, don't want to be associated with a story like this because they don't want they don't want it to put them at risk in their career. And I totally understand that. There's also a fear of retribution. So we'll get into that later in the episode as well. The other thing that happened is this story has become very draining, and I have mixed feelings about that. I say this later in the episode, but there's always been this sort of obviously the subject matter is very heavy and intense, but there's always been some sort of brevity along with it. There are elements of the story that can be entertaining. And I think I have noticed, and a lot of my counterparts agree, there are no longer those points of brevity in this kind of sad, depressing story because Megan has so doubled down on her past behavior. She really has not changed at all, in my opinion. And that's put me in a weird position when it comes to this podcast because the reason I did this podcast is to spread awareness of Megan's behavior. And I always knew that that would come with the caveat that some people would take Megan's side. I can't control that, and it is what it is, and it's fine. But the position we're in now is that Megan is doing the same loop of behaviors over and over and over again. It's the same story in a different font. And when I continue to talk about it, I'm not getting the people who are going to instinctively take Megan's side because maybe they think what she's doing is bad, but she thinks for some reason the group is worse. They don't really listen, they don't really pay attention, all these things. I can't, by continuing to tell the same story in a different font, it's not going to change their mind. It's going to make Megan double down in her feelings that there's a mob after her, and I don't agree that there is one after her. I think that she's a public figure who publicly speaks about her things going on in her life, and those things going on in her life are, patterns of behavior that we recognize. She's putting out a public call and plea for help. A lot of the time, misrepresenting stories or coming up with these big, fantastical, over the top things going on, and, to try and get people to help her. And then they get wrapped up in this scenario with her all over again, where it's like, you know, they are either financially scammed or emotionally drained or accused of sexual assault or some combination of the three. So, continuing to do this, I don't know. I guess the challenge I would say is that I've had a problem covering an ongoing story when I'm a character and when the group listening is a character. Megan claims that because these podcasts exist, we all have nothing better to do and we are the reason for her shortcomings, and that's not true. But at this point, I don't know how much more entertainment value the people listening for entertainment will get, again retelling the same story with different fonts, um and going back into Megan's past when some of these people fear retribution, especially because she's acting like that on social media right now. So for now, I'm going to wrap up the Megan Stoner season, but that does not mean that you have to unsubscribe. Today, we're going to go into the details, kind of wrap up this story, kind of answer some questions or address some things that have been heavily commented on with myself, Justin, Chloe, Alex, and Sandra. Sandra is not her real name, but she doesn't want to use her voice, or she wants to remain anonymous. You've seen her work surely on Facebook and Twitter, but she just wants to remain anonymous. So we're going to kind of go through our final thoughts on the season. When there is breaking news, and by breaking news I mean like if and when Megan is arrested again, and I think she is under investigation now. I would be very surprised if she is not charged with something. This podcast feed, I'm going to put that update in this feed. So you'll be able to remain in the know. And if you are also, wanting to know more, the Facebook group and stuff, I'm not going to like shut down, commentary about Megan or anything like that. But one of the privileges of doing this podcast is so many people have sent me other interesting stories that are similar but different than Megan's. And I'm really excited to bring those stories to you and bring them to you more consistently and all of those things. So that is where this podcast is going to be headed. I'm hoping in the next few weeks I'll be able to start pumping out these new seasons, one based in the same area of Indiana, one based in North Carolina, that actually Tiffany from Something Was Wrong sent to me, ones that, distant family members have reached out saying, oh my God, this sounds similar to Megan. Would you look into this? I'm really excited to bring all of these stories to you. I think that there's something so interesting. I know I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes that, fraud as we know it really only gets mentioned when it's really high profile. Bernie Madoff or Enron or not Enron, but you know what I mean? Things like that. And I think that there's something really new, and Justin talks about this all the time. The law has not caught up to fraudsters like Megan and these other ones that I'm going to cover. And these people who do low level fraud schemes and just go on with their life as if it's normal and don't change their behavior. I just think that that's very interesting, the way that they go about their life and interact with society and don't really change and don't really make up for what they do. And all of the people that they victimized or traumatized are standing there like, am I crazy? Why why does this person keep getting away with it? So I really hope that you continue to listen, send this to your friends. I think these stories are very interesting, but let's not forget where we came from. Let's not forget the Megan saga, and let's kind of get into now like wrapping up how that would go. So thank you all so much for listening. Let's get into the episode. I'm Amanda, and this is Don't Waste This Effing Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, White Ox Creative, a digital marketing agency headquartered in Noblesville, Indiana, serving clients nationwide. You know how it feels when you come across a brand that just gets it right? Their website looks amazing, their social media catches your eye, and everything about their brand just clicks. Well, that's exactly what White Ox Creative does for businesses in today's crowded digital landscape. They're not just another digital marketing agency. They're masters at helping businesses tell their unique stories and build memorable brands. What I love about White Ox is that they combine bold, innovative design with strategic thinking that actually drives results. Whether you're starting from scratch or need to refresh your existing brand, their team brings fresh perspectives while keeping your business goals front and center. They handle everything from brand strategy and visual identity to website design and marketing materials. I've seen their work firsthand, and let me tell you, it's impressive. They have this unique ability to capture the essence of a business and translate it into designs that really connect with people. Here's the exciting part. White Ox Creative is offering our listeners a complimentary brand audit. That's a $750 value just for mentioning this podcast. Just visit whiteoxcreative.com/DWTFP to claim this exclusive offer. Don't let your brand blend into the background. If you're ready to stand out and make a lasting impression, White Ox Creative is your answer. Again, that's whiteoxcreative.com/DWTFP to get your free brand audit. Now, let's get into today's episode. All right, we are back with the final episode for now of the Megan Stoner saga, because I'm sure that it does not end here. Today we have Justin, Alex, Chloe, and Sandra. Sandra is not her real name, but she wants to go by Sandra. We don't want to expose who she is. She'd prefer to remain anonymous. You know her. You've seen her work before. That's all I'll say. So today, on this last episode, I think we all just want to, I think everyone's said this in a different way, but it's unfortunate that the story no longer feels fun. And I really empathize with the listeners who are just getting into this, thinking like, oh my God, this is so much, like, this is so crazy. And, reaching out to Megan and she'll follow you back and she messages you for money and, the wild chaos. But I feel like we're in last summer again, but even more hopeless because we don't know when new charges are going to come down on her. I'm very confident they will, but we don't know what they will be. So I think when we left off in the last episode, it was right after the Greg's mustache and Sarah Lebo incident where they were going back and forth. And I think Sarah had just said that she was done with Megan. God, it feels like it's been a lifetime since even that happened. And basically Megan's just been up to her old antics. She's messaging people constantly for money. She's got a new coach. She's trying to get Coco, I don't even think I had mentioned that Coco was taken into a shelter and then taken, she was trying to get money to get Coco. She did end up getting Coco. She's trying to get her stuff from her aunt. Her aunt has Megan's things, won't give it back. Her aunt is trying to not talk to Megan. Megan keeps blowing up her aunt. The latest thing, she was trying to tell people that if they give her money, she'll pay them back double when she gets her student loans, because apparently she is now in either an MBA program or a doctoral program, and she did get student loans for that. She told Justin she was pursuing an MBA from one university in Indiana, and then she posted the next day on Twitter that she was actually getting a PhD from Liberty University in traumatology. What am I missing? What am I missing over the last few weeks, you guys? Everyone's muted.
I mean, yeah, the craziest things I think have been that she told me that she was attending WGU, which is Western Governors University. I think like 20 some or 30 some states like offer that. It's a very low cost, all online program. It's how my mom got her teaching certificate. Like, it's just a way for people to go into high needs professions in a quick and affordable way. And she sent me that screenshots of her student loan money and like it being paid, and it looks like the loan amount was for like $8,000. Then the tuition cost was like $4,000 and some, and so that gave her like $4,000 and some to play with. And that's supposed to cover expenses like for somebody that's going back to school and maybe can't work as much or whatever. And I noticed around that time that she like stopped asking for money for about 2 weeks, like at least like the mass call outs. Like I think she still has her automated thing, like if anyone follows her, like they get the thing, help me rebuild my life. But she had about $4,000, and immediately, like, you could just tell, like, her asking for money 3 times a day stopped. And she immediately started posting about all these coaches and chiropractors, and I'm getting a massage today, and I'm doing healing work. And that's sort of all been in the last week, would you guys say? Like, just in the last day or two, she's claimed that she went to the stress center, which is what we call like the psych ward here in Indianapolis. She went there for 24 hours after a suicide attempt with sleeping pills. And ever since getting back out, she's been asking people to do 2 things. A, she's asking for money again. And B, she's in some kind of a dispute about material belongings with her Aunt Linda. Linda's not talking to her, and so she's posting Linda's phone number online and telling people to contact her and help her get her stuff back from Linda's house. If you're hearing this, please don't call that poor woman. Her number is on the internet. Don't go looking. Like, she's been through enough. Leave her alone. One thing I'll say is, like, the suicide attempt with the sleeping pills is a total lie, because if you, and again, I've done some work in these areas of the city, and I know how these things work, but she, like, you don't go into the hospital for taking pills and get back out 24-ish hours later. Like, she probably would have been in the ER most of that time, and then even once she gets transferred over to the psych ward, like even if she signed the paper to leave against medical advice, like it would take, they could put at least a 24 or if not a 72-hour hold on her. There's just no way it all would have happened as quickly as she said. Like it's another lie.
It was under 12 hours that she said that she texted you, you guys win. I'm back in the stress center, and then she was out later that night. Like it was under 12 hours, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
That would not happen. What else? Sandra, Chloe, Alex, what else am I missing?
The best thing that I saw was that she was posting her transcript from Ball State and saying something along the lines of, yeah, for everyone who, says I Photoshop stuff, I actually do have my master's. Here's my transcript. And someone replied and said, yeah, with your 2.6 GPA.
That was the most hilarious part.
So I think, and like, okay, it's a little funny, but this is Megan's weird thing that she does, is that she tries to say, hey, well, I have 2 master's degrees. I have a master's degree. It's like, ma'am, okay, I know a lot of people who have master's degrees and still work at Starbucks, which again, nothing against, working at Starbucks or working in service. I did so for like 10 years, right? But she makes these claims that are just so grandiose and just go ahead, Justin. But it's
the
just
fact that she's unwilling
crazy
to do it. Like there's nothing wrong with it, but she's unwilling to do it.
Absolutely. And it's like, hey, just because you have a master's, like, doesn't mean that you automatically are deserving of a job. Like, get a job first, and then maybe you can, throw your degree around a little bit. But unfortunately, she just can't do it.
Who's gonna hire a 26-year-old that has 0 work experience?
Hey, when she was working in Governor Holcomb's administration, she was working very hard. Okay, put a little bit more respect on her name. Just kidding.
That's one thing. That's something I left out.
Not only that, who's gonna hire her, giving her access to non-public information, people's social security numbers? Nobody.
Yeah, well, that's part of it too. I mean, well, 2 things I will say about that. I was listening to people talk about actually like academics that had nothing to do with Megan, talking about how you have a trade-off of status versus money early in your career. And if you're going to pursue academia, you almost always understand that you're going to live poor for a little bit. Like, that's a bad way of explaining it, but like, you're not going to live in the fancy 3-bedroom townhome in the nice part of town. You're studying, you're learning, and like you believe that that'll pay off for you later in your life, but you don't live like you're ballin' at that stage. And that was never Megan. Megan at that time was running around saying, oh, I'm an advisor in the Pence administration or the Holcomb administration. Like, no, you're not. And it's just funny because a lot of people who pursue academia understand that about themselves, and they know, I'm going to be working at Starbucks, but I would rather pursue this degree. And, later on, that has never been an attitude that I've observed from Megan. And then there was the thing, if we remember Emily from the last episode, Emily had taken Megan under her wing and seemed to be backing her. She hates us. She's tweeting about all of us, saying that we're all terrible people and not Christian and all these things, whatever. And Emily tweeted something at one point saying, well, I heard from someone other than Megan that, she did work in the governor's cabinet. And it's like,
yeah, and I'm Dana Perino. Come on.
Yeah, like, it's like, first of all, like, not to get like super in depth on the political things, but to the people who, I think it's a big deal if you're in your 30s and work in a governor's cabinet. Then you're like really getting, you're a really big deal. If you are like 36, 38 and you're appointed to one of those roles, I think Justin said that once. Like, under no circumstance is a 24-year-old ever going to serve in a governor's administration, ever. That doesn't happen. And then when Emily says, I heard from someone else, it wasn't even from Megan. Okay, so you heard from a Google Voice number.
Yep, absolutely.
So she's still doing the same thing.
She's doing the same stuff, and what kills me is that we just had Governor Braun inaugurated here not too long ago, and Kyle and I, we went to the inauguration, and we had a lot of folks saying, "Hey, what's up with Megan Stoner?" as what happens when we go to Republican events. But if you look at like Governor Braun's actual cabinet, most people are in their 50s and 60s. I don't think there's anybody in there that's in their 40s. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to go look. But the fact that, she would be going around saying that, oh, I'm 24 years old, I'm in the governor's cabinet, that doesn't happen. We barely get people in their 20s who run for the state house or the state legislature and win. So I don't know. It's just frustrating that, she gets out of jail and then just starts on that behavior all over again. And I remember talking to her, and I don't know if you guys asked her this either, but I talked to her like the last couple of weeks that she was in jail, and I asked her, I said, hey, are you getting any type of counseling? Are you getting any type of therapy in jail? Are you going to get rehabilitated? Because I said, what makes me nervous is that I don't want you to get out and reoffend. And she said that she wasn't getting any type of services or anything in jail. Now, again, we also know that Megan is not the most honest person. But I just don't know what else we can do as a collective to help other than, warn folks against the behavior. But it just kind of makes me sad that we had a lot of folks who we're rooting for to make good choices. I mean, she's texted Justin about paying, some of her court fees, and Justin has been very gracious and kind when he doesn't have to be, because Megan's treated him like dirt, and saying like, hey, we like seeing good choices, like make more good choices. And I don't know, it's just sad because, and we were talking about this earlier, but I just don't know where this all ends. And I think that's the question that's kind of open-ended.
I was going to say, like, that's a great point, Chloe. Like, to your credit, like, you and I think, talked to her probably the most those last couple weeks in jail. And, like, people didn't hear those calls because they're not, like, super juicy and they didn't make it into the podcast. But, like, we really tried. Like, we really honestly tried and, like, told her, like, there was one call where I talked to her, like, until it timed out on the jail app, like, where I was like, Megan, like, you understand you're going to have to, like, with the amount of money that's going to be garnished off your wages, like, you may have to work 2 or 3 jobs. Like, are you prepared for that? Like, do you know what you're going into? And she's like, yep, I'm prepared to do what I need to do. And, like, we really tried to, like, get her to understand, like, hey, it's not going to be easy, but all anybody wants is for you to turn this around and for you to be, like, a successful, productive member of society. It's just going to be really hard for a few years. And she, I mean, night one, the Amazon list was up. Like, it was just like,
Yep.
okay, and she's not gonna change. Like, nothing.
It's actually jarring to me how little she really went back to doing the exact same thing as before. Exact same. But while we're on this topic, Justin, Chloe, Alex, can you tell me a little bit about, like, what made you want to keep talking, or to talk to Megan and keep talking to her sometimes? Because I think that that's one of the biggest unanswered questions from the podcast, is people just don't understand why people would talk to her. So can you guys, like, give a little bit of why you did that?
So for me, I realized that she was very honest with me in the original call that I had with her that made it into your podcast, this podcast, and then something was wrong. What a lot of folks I don't think realized was that when I had my tweet thread that went viral and I kept adding to it as the story unfolded, Megan reached out to me and wanted to talk. I didn't have any interest in doing that. But then as I was on the phone with her and was trying to get her to, admit to stuff, I realized, like, holy crap, she might actually admit to more crimes on the phone. This is wild. Didn't talk to her for about a year. And then the last couple of weeks that she was in jail, I had this like weird feeling come over me where I felt like, you know what, like, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I believe that everybody can be redeemed. I have very strong opinions about working with people and, just trying to get them to do the right thing and just show them, like, grace, whatever. I don't want to get into a long religious tangent, but I called her and I just said, Megan, I'm rooting for you. I am praying for you. I want you to be rehabilitated. What can I help you do in terms of, finding a job? What resources can I send your way? Do you have a plan? Those were a lot of those conversations that that I kept private, but I also was asking her other questions because she did go around for a long time saying that she had $15,000 in a bank account and nobody could get her to admit if that was true or not. And with everything that she had been doing to Tom, part of me wondered, okay, if she talks long enough, will she admit to more crimes? Will there be more things that eventually come out? And so I only talked to her for a couple of weeks. I didn't talk to her nearly as long as Justin did, but that's some of my reasoning behind why I talked to her. People can like it, they cannot like it. It is what it is. But as Justin has said many times, we did what we did. If you don't like it, you don't have to live with it. We can and we will.
Yeah. Well, I think two things with that. There are just weird things that I never would have thought would have popped out that really caught people off guard about this podcast. Like things that like little phrases. Like one that really gets people mad is when I referred to myself as not being sex positive. Like
Seriously?
almost every Reddit thread is like, who says something like that? Or like any comment, like I got a bunch of comments about that. And I think maybe sometimes things lack context. So like the context that is really important for like that first call with you, Chloe, and Justin, Megan reached out to you wanting to do a Zoom call. Like she gets out of jail, she's been arrested, she knows people are talking about her, and she wants to do a Zoom call, which she insisted should not be recorded. And of course it was going to be I mean, come on.
I
And
will say this here. I have never once spoken to Megan that I didn't record it because I want a record of whatever she says I said.
because she can be so gaslighty that it's like you need to be able to go back, because no, I never said that, and she said it, like you want the recordings, but like that is really important, crucial context that I don't think we made clear enough in the podcast. Is like you were pretty stern with her at parts of that, Chloe, but it's because she requested the meeting with you.
Yeah, she requested the meeting with me, and then she was in my Twitter DMs, was saying a bunch of stuff just to like get under my skin. And even now, tweeting at me saying that I'm bullying her and trying to like tag my work, which it's like, hey, go ahead and do that. I don't think she realizes that I run my work's Twitter account, but I'm really the only one who has access to it. I think it should not be lost on the listeners that we have just done a lot that has been buried behind the scenes. But I think the best thing that we can do to make sure that Megan doesn't hurt anybody else is to just bring awareness, whether people like it or not. That is the only thing that I think that has been effective.
I agree. And really quick, just to clarify on that sex positive thing, when I said that, I think Justin's the first person who ever said that to describe both of us in a way that we were making fun of ourselves. Like, I don't talk about things like that, particularly with strangers, never on the internet. Like, you will never see me making a sexual joke. It's just not I don't have a problem with people who do that. It's just never been me. So one of the reasons I call myself that or would say that is because adding that layer to the fact that I did the Yanni thing, I think it makes it funnier. Because I'm the last, if you knew me in real life, I'm the last person that you would expect to come up with a fake sexual massage therapist healing thing. But, so I don't know. There are things, yeah, I mean, there will just never be complete context. But Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about why you reached out to Megan?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like everybody else, it was just to kind of build rapport with Megan and see if she would report anything to me or share any information. Wasn't trying to pry anything out of her. I think one of the great things about Megan is if you sit back and let her talk, she shares. She's not indiscriminate about what she shares and who she shares it to. So by building rapport, you can kind of just let her, let the boulder roll down the hill, so to speak. I think for me, the reason why I initially reached out to her was I had a lot of questions about her and I's, I don't want to say like relationship, but some of the things that had happened in the Spice Girls group that she said or she did that I still had questions about, years later, and things that I, have talked about in therapy, things that I just wanted, some clarification on, just really for myself. And by doing that, she was able to just continue talking with me, and sharing her thoughts and feelings and her actions and so on and so forth. I did want to touch on Chloe's phone call that, we've all heard with this podcast, and something was wrong. The reason why that phone call was so important, not only because Megan requested the call with Chloe, but because that phone call destroyed and really called out the core of what Megan does and what Megan says to harm people and manipulate people. She built this online persona that she's this political consultant and analyst and, sits on these cabinets or whatever. But in that phone call, Chloe was able to get Megan to admit to the fact that all of it was a lie. And by doing that, I think it really showed how deep it went and also brought awareness to her narrative. So when she got out of jail, that information was public. And by doing that, it means that we're able to reduce harm not only to other people on the internet who might come across it, but also to Megan herself. And I mean, I think one of the things that gets so lost in all of this is like, yeah, Megan is a really interesting subject to talk about, but it is just as depressing as it is interesting. And that depressing factor, I mean, it hits really differently for each of us, for many, many different reasons. But for me, it was this, she was a Spice Girl. I mean, I've mentioned this so many times. I met, I think, half of my bridesmaids through, actually, probably less than that. I met some bridesmaids to my wedding through the Spice Girls. Like, there's this community and connection that's unlike anything I've experienced in other communities online. Not saying that they don't exist, but there's something deeply special about that group. And it was, as much as she hurt me and hurt people I love and care about, I've always rooted for her and I've always wanted her to be successful. I've always wanted it to sort of be that was the worst thing she ever did. And I would like to think that she learned from that and moved on, and she didn't. And that was so ungodly heartbreaking. And there's just, as like I said, as fun as it is to talk about her, to go back to the first episode of this very podcast, this isn't just about spreading awareness to reduce Megan's harm, but it's also about reducing Megan's reach to hurt other people and in return hurt herself. And that kind of brings me all back to, your original question of why did you continue to talk to her? It's because, well, she kept saying stuff. And by her, as she kept saying things, we were able to connect more dots. We were able to connect the dots with the Teslas. We were able to connect the dots with Tom. We were able to do all of these things and help other people find avenues for their own justice and healing from the impact that Megan had on their lives.
Yeah. Okay. Now, continuing on this thought process of like why people continue to talk to her, and we'll start with Sandra here. Why do you think in your mind, and I think all of us would agree, that it's not only appropriate but important to keep talking about Megan publicly?
It's more like what Alex said, to spread awareness. Everyone is on the same page. The less people are harmed by her, the better. But at the same time, we end up finding out more stuff than we did initially. And I know, like, when the Facebook group started, I was added maybe 2 months after it, when I came into contact about the whole Abby thing. I'm like, what the hell? And then that's where Tom was found. And then we found other stuff. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything on that?
The more she talks, the more she ends up incriminating herself.
This is kind of what I wanted to say earlier. And like, if nothing else that I've said that people have heard me say about Meghan, if people hate everything I've said and done regarding Meghan, like, I want people to take this away, what I'm about to say. The law has not caught up to a person with these kinds of personality disorders having access to the internet. Like, I think people look at Meghan, some of the people online on the Reddit threads that have defended her, they look at her and they say, well, I mean, she's never gotten any one person for really that much money in the grand scheme of things. She's not dangerous in the terms of, I don't think she's going to, like, knife anybody in the street or anything like that. Like, she's kind of harmless. She's just kind of comical. And, like, I completely get why, if you're just new to this and you look at the big picture, you might think that. But when you look at all of the, like, misdemeanor to low level felony things that Meghan has actually done in her life, like, it is just a repeated cycle that keeps her sick. And like Chloe and Alex and Sandra have all said, like, I mean, you guys have all read my text with Meghan. Like, there's a bit of our rapport that's kind of like Big Brother sometimes, where I'm like, Meghan, like, and it's like, I'm like kind of scolding her sometimes. Like I am rooting for her, and like keeping her in this cycle, keeps her sick. She's able to just kind of chew people up and spit them back out, in terms of like always being able to find another person who's sympathetic to the position she's in, which is objectively very, like, helpless, and like they want to help her, and then she just kind of sucks them dry, either emotionally, financially, or a combination of the two, spits them back out, and then she'll find somebody else on the internet to manipulate for a couple weeks, and just continually do that. And I don't think our justice system, I don't think the laws are written to deal with that kind of mentally disturbed person like this, like just being online and talking to strangers all the time. Used to be like, if a person like that lived in a town like Elwood, Indiana, like everyone in town would have known, like, yeah, she's crazy, and everyone would have sort of known how to deal with her, and that would have been her whole world. But now she's got access to the entire world, and we have not yet gotten the balance right of how to deal with a person like that in the modern era. And you may not like the extent to which all of us have gone, or any one of us has gone, to raise awareness or to put the story out there. You don't have to like that. Like I always say, like, we can live with what we've done. But I just want you to think about that. Like, do you really feel like the statutes have been written to deal with a person like this before you judge? And I think the answer to that is no.
Yeah, well, and I think that kind of brings me to where I've felt the most helpless in all of this, because I think we've all said this, and maybe I already said this too, but like, it just doesn't feel fun anymore. It just feels like she's sick, and I'm, kind of adding to it on one hand. I don't know. I see all of the things where people are like, why do you have to, like, you know, you guys went too far, nobody should still be talking about this. I wouldn't still be talking about this if she wasn't still doing all of this. Like the best case scenario would have been that I put out the podcast, she came out, was completely normal, rational, didn't do anything, and then I delete the whole thing. That's what I would have rather have happened, but it obviously that was never going to happen, because I think we all kind of knew, or at least anybody who had been following her kind of knew, like, okay, well, she's not going to change. Like, but feeding in, like, now we're kind of at a stage, in my opinion, and I don't know where the line is, because I think it's incredibly hard to draw, but we're in a stage where she's now in this symbiotic relationship with us, where every day, instead of waking up and choosing to do something and be productive, at least part of her day is dedicated to interacting with her haters online. So, like, a couple nights ago, she started tweeting at me randomly. I don't get the notifications because she blocked me. But she's like, it should be noted that Amanda Talks and I have never met before. And I'm like, yeah, I noted that throughout the entire podcast, but you still reached out to me for money. You still scammed half my friends. Like, you're still scamming half my, like, I get messages weekly from people that I've not spoken to in 7 years, that I met one time, who are like, hey, she Venmo requested me for money today. It's like, you're still, like, I wouldn't be talking about her if she didn't continue affecting all of us. But then when we talk about her, then she goes back into the cycle. So I don't really know where to cut it off and end it.
Well, and I think, at least for me, and one thing I will say, I don't think the phrase is necessarily it's not fun anymore, because I don't think any of this has been fun. But I understand what you're saying. I think that the haha, things will get better feeling has worn off. And I think that a lot of us, when we originally kind of, got together in this community, thought that, okay, once she, goes to jail, like you said, Amanda, things will probably get better and she'll get rehabilitated. And that's not what's happened. And I think that's the sad realization, is that the hope is gone. And there's not a lot that I think can build that back up for us. Because for me, and I think I texted you guys about this either this morning or yesterday, but she is trying to manipulate Tom again. And it's just absolutely disgusting that this cycle is not ending. I don't know. I don't know what to do anymore. That's the sad thing.
I think the thing that's important to note is that those of us who have talked to law enforcement about Megan, not a single one of them have said we've ever gone too far. And I did ask the investigator, just in conversation, I was like, are we doing too much? Are we overstepping? And he said no. Like, the only reason why we know half of this stuff is through the conversations you've had, through, you letting us know about what was said over a jail phone call. Those are so easy for them to pull. So you personally, like as a person, might feel that we've gone too far because maybe it's not something that you yourself would have done. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But just know that from a law enforcement perspective, that's not the case. It just isn't.
Well, and somebody said that to me at one point, because I was kind of venting to them about like how some people on the Reddit forums and stuff had said like that the Yoni thing was too far and that it was too vigilante for them, which fine, you can think that, but like my friend said to me, did the police not go right away? Like when we called them and told them like, hey, she's at this address, they immediately went and got her. They wouldn't have done that if it wasn't helpful. Like, and like I always say, like, yeah, for somebody that was charged with the things she was charged with, like, they don't do a manhunt. Like, there's not a door-to-door search for her. Like, they go to her house. If she's not there, like, they sort of wait to find her. Like that. I mean, they're not going all over searching high and low for her. But if you say, hey, she's right here, they will go. And they did.
They are very familiar with Megan.
Yes.
And while I understand, like, if you just look at her sheet on my case, she doesn't look that interesting. But she routinely calls the police to file false reports continuously. She has a reputation within the police department. Through multiple police departments, she had a reputation while she was in jail. When I called the jail to have my number blocked because it was just getting to be too much and way too abusive on her end, the officer said, she's never going to stop. And I'm so sorry you got pulled into this as well. I mean, through that conversation, I could tell that they were just as exhausted as everybody else. But when the call was made, as Justin said, where she was, I have a seeking suspicion that they went quick because they are also just as done with her as the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, and that, like, that's the hard part too, where it's like, I mean, we were talking about jobs that she could do earlier. Like, I feel kind of bad for whoever is gonna hire her and have to deal with her antics, because I don't think that tomorrow she snaps out of this and just like is a perfectly contributing member to society. And by the way, who is, right? Like, we all make mistakes, all of these things, but I don't know. Justin, you said earlier she's either gonna financially drain or emotionally drain people. Well, there's a third thing too. She'll accuse people of sexual assault,
Yeah.
and like, so we've kind of like, it's like this weird scenario where it's like I don't know what there is to do for her or about her other than spread awareness, which is what I've done. And part of the reason it's been so hard lately is just because it's like, this is one person, like, it's hard to be a character in the story, basically, and keep covering it. Like, anything, every day there's a new meltdown or something happening.
I think it was easier even just a couple of months ago because there was that hope of like, she might get better. But then there's this other part too of this sort of like bilateral empathy where it's we need to advocate for Meghan just as much as we need to advocate for the public and reduce harm on both ends of the stick. And lately, it feels as if it's a little bit of self-harm on Meghan's end of things, that she's doing this almost to hurt herself because the reach that she had now is not what she had a few months ago because more people know about it. I mean, people all over the world now know about Meghan. And I know that sounds really insane, but I've gotten DMs from people who are listening from Turkey, from, Asia or Asian countries, a couple of different Asian countries. It's not, she doesn't have the reach that she used to have, which is so good. And it helps, I mean, at least me sleep better at night, knowing that her reach is narrowed and her ability to harm is narrowed. But what she's doing now is upsetting because it really does seem like she's just out to hurt herself and she doesn't realize that she's doing it.
Yeah. Well, and so that's why I'm kind of ending the season at this point. And like I said, like, you can keep following the feed because I have more stories coming. And if there are Meghan updates, I will always post the Meghan updates like on a separate, like emergency kind of update thing. But I'm not going to do it where every few weeks I come on and just say the same thing over and over. She found a new person who seems to be homeless or disabled or something, and she's scamming them, or elderly, or, something. And, she's posting a lot about them, and then she's posting about a coach, and then she's doing like, we're not going to keep just covering the same cycle. I laid out what the cycle is. She hasn't broken the cycle. There are other pending cases against her, and I would be shocked if one isn't eventually acted upon. But for now, to continue covering it is just to continue making her, in a weird way, think she's infamous, which I guess she kind of is. Can we speak a little bit on, and I think somebody brought this up before, but I just want to make this very clear. Like, I can speak for all of us here. None of us are calling potential employers telling them not to hire Meghan.
Absolutely not.
No, I've never done that.
Never. I actually told her a place
Nope.
to apply to. Like, no, none of us have done that.
I
would
her a
review
list.
her resume. I would literally review her resume for free. I normally charge for that. I would genuinely review her resume free of charge.
Now, one other thing to break off on, because, there are, and I didn't realize this going into making the podcast, but there are going to be certain people who listen and instinctively take Meghan's side because they, that's who they empathize with for whatever reason. And I can't control, I think I said in the last episode, I can't control how people view the podcast and listen to it, whatever. I think it speaks volumes that 99% of the people who, or actually I think 100% of the people who have met Meghan kind of come down on our side, right? It's after they talk to her for a few weeks. But there are some people who in the interim side more with her. And that's fine. But when those people start to interact with people in our crowd, I think that our crowd can kind of go after them kind of hard. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that? About the internet clashes over this?
I will. And I think that what people need to understand is that our kind of crowd, I would say our core group of people who have been either talking to police, involved with the podcast, part of the Yoni scheme, part of the Indianapolis, kind of group of politicos who have been doing a lot of that groundwork, there's probably 10 of us, 10 to 12. I'd say 10 to 12 of us. The larger circle, I would say, of people who are actively involved and post in other Indianapolis related groups that say like, hey, beware of Meghan Stoner, I'd say is maybe 100. I'd say in the Meghan Stoner scam Facebook awareness group, there's like 2,000 people. So I think what listeners need to understand is that the folks who are mainly in these groups have either met Meghan, have dealt with her, were scammed by her in other Facebook groups, or were affected by her when she worked quote unquote, I have to catch myself there, worked, quote unquote, at the Indiana State House. Like, I have a friend, I just remembered this the other day. I have a friend that Meghan tried to get fired at the State House, and I completely forgot about that story. Like, there are people that she may not have committed crimes against, but she has directly hurt in other ways, right? By trying to get them fired. I mean, look at me, tagging me and trying on Twitter and saying that I'm bullying her and trying to, tag my work and get me in quote unquote trouble. So I think that for anyone who's coming in from the outside and wants to kind of like get involved 10 years into this weird circus of people, need to understand like there's a lot of hurt in this community. And I think that most of us are doing what we can to spread awareness. But at the same time, like, yeah, there are some personalities in there that it might be, tough to clash with.
If I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me, but did she not call people's employers for anyone that outed her on her scams?
I think she's definitely threatened it.
Yeah, I mean, she was tagging Chloe's employer the other day, like she said. I mean, like, yeah, so she's maybe projecting a little bit there. You're right.
Well, I mean, I'll just say Justin and I have a friend who received multiple texts from weird Google numbers or something trying to figure out if it was his number. He's not really involved in the podcast or anything. I got a bunch of login attempts to my Instagram accounts, to my business account, to my personal account, and to the podcast account. So, I mean, I think she's trying to do something to, like, I would assume, right? Because this is at the time that she was tagging me and things. She's trying to get into my Instagram. I don't know if that's true or not. Like that's kind of getting to a point too now where it's like she seems to be trying to retaliate. And on one hand, I don't want to back off at that point and make her think that like, okay, this is how you scare us into stopping talking, but like also it's not worth it to me if she's going to reach out to like current and former clients of mine and say don't work with her. Like that's just not something I want to explain to them. They also all listen, so they know, you know? Like, but it's a weird, I think really what she's trying to do is figure out who Greg's mustache is.
Where she said, and I've heard this too, she's thinking that the mustache and this Chronicles account is the same person. It's like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like
Well,
this is just her being manic. Like it's like we've all been saying this whole time. It's never gonna stop. Like she's always gonna be obsessed about like she'll wake up Tuesday and decide like I need to find out who the mustache is, and then like Wednesday she's gonna be mad at Amanda for the podcast and try to hack her Instagram all day. Like it's always gonna be something. It's never gonna stop. And I think all of us are just kind of exhausted by it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we said everything that needs to be said. Is there any final parting thoughts anybody has?
I think the big thing that is just so wild is that, and I know Justin has said this a lot on this podcast and then on Something Was Wrong, but Meghan's not done. And I don't think, as Justin has mentioned, that the craziest thing that she's done has happened yet.
Yeah.
And I think we are in this spiral of her getting out of jail, trying to scam, trying to grasp at any straws that she can, trying to grasp at any lifeline. And it just kind of gets into this cycle of mania. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with her posting on social media. And so I think that if anyone has followed along to the podcast, I think the best thing for them to do is to just not engage Meghan, obviously, right? Not engage, and to just stay vigilant and to make sure that no one like Meghan or Meghan herself takes advantage of you, your friends, or your family, because she just will not stop. And I've said this for a while. I don't know how the story ends. I hope she gets the help that she clearly needs, but I'm not hopeful. And that's what's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that. I obviously agree with everything Chloe said. I struggle because on the one hand, like I see people online and some people say like, oh, well, it's really hard to get a job if you're a felon. And like, she has no other options. She's in a very dire situation. And like my community in this city, in certain 12-step groups and in different groups with convicted felons, people that had, one guy comes to mind that, was a 5-time felon for like, drug possessions and stuff. Like some of those felonies higher levels than what Megan got, you can get a job. But the idea of like going to McDonald's or Arby's and like just working and paying some restitution and like just grinding it out for a couple years to get her life back on behavior since getting out, that is good to be that she is some kind of inspirational figure and like she's going to make all this money writing or speaking or something like that. Like she is so grandiose that she will never ever do that. And the reason she hasn't is not because she's a felon. It's not because any of us here are calling and telling like fast food places not to hire her. That's what she says, is that we're like, you've got the people on here right now that like would be the ones calling and like we're telling you we're not doing that. Like she's not willing to get a normal job.
No, absolutely not.
It's sad.
It's below her pay grade of what she feels of her entitlement.
Exactly.
Totally.
Sandra, do you have anything else you want to, like, any thoughts? And then, I mean, I guess I should have done this first, but after...
Recently, people have been reaching out to me, whether if it's by text, by Facebook, whatever the case may be, telling me that Megan keeps exploiting them. And it's just not your regular Joes. It's more senior citizens. And that is so embarrassing to be going through that, you know? It's hurtful to see that.
I've said this for a long time in regards to Megan getting a job, because I've Greek American, so families have always had restaurants, right? Like I'll feed into the stereotype. And my extended family members have always hired folks on work release, have always hired folks who've worked in the mission. And to me, and I think that this is what the listeners need to understand, is that as long as Megan is not working with the elderly or working with children, I don't care what she does for a living. But it's that, like what you said, Sandra, about her, exploiting the elderly or taking advantage of them. And I don't think her aunt is elderly, or at least like not very old. But I think that's how she went around and stole her credit card and stole from her about 8-9 years ago. And it just is scary that these cycles are continuing. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's very scary that this is continuing again.
I used to work in restaurants. I've said this on one of the episodes. One of the restaurants I worked at, they would specifically hire people who had been convicted of felonies, and we would all get mad because that person, the restaurant wouldn't want to fire them because they get a tax incentive. They get a tax break if they hire someone. So Megan claims she's so high profile and she's infamous and she has so much going on. At the end of the day, in this economy, if a business is going to get a tax break to hire her, she's really got to push the limit to lose that job,
We know from the court documents that the reason she was kicked out of work release, like the biggest one, was that like she had not gotten a job yet. And we know that she had applied through, people that are in the group to a job at Americans for Prosperity, which is like a political like activist group. And so she was sitting in work release thinking she was going to get some kind of a political job rather than, accept that it's going to be some kind of, I told her in a text one time, and I think you did too, Chloe, like I was like, your options are warehouses, restaurants, gas stations, like that's it. And she's still going to apply for the Americans for Prosperity job, like because she thinks she's entitled to it, like Sandra said.
I'm still holding out hope that Megan gets better one day. I'm still holding out hope that she sort of drops the cycle and becomes a productive member of society, not just for everybody else's well-being, but for her own. She really does have a lot of potential to be a really impactful person in so many great ways, but she needs to put her evil powers for good, and I know she can do it. So if there's anything that I could say is I'm still holding out hope that there is hope to be had.
Really quick, I will say, because this was sent to me earlier, that Megan's now starting a Substack. And I think I've said this in the podcast. I've said this a million times. If she wants to start making money from content, personally, that doesn't bother me. She probably won't make very much. It costs a lot of money. You need to have a lot of people watching you to make money creating content. But I would rather her pursue that than like nothing, than, like digitally panhandling. So, I think, if people are interested in sexual healing, subscribe to Megan's Substack. I don't know.
I would just like to agree with Alex, where it's like I don't know if I have hope or whatever, but I some people have said, particularly Emily, Indie Rad Mama, whatever you want to call her, like has said, like, oh, we just want to push her to the point that she like takes her own life or whatever. And like I have talked to Megan probably as much as anyone at this point, and like no one wants that. Like we all anyone wants is for her to become a productive member of society and to get better. Like ultimately, Amanda and I talk about this all the time, like the constant moving, the constant, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, not having clothes, losing clothes along the way at different people's houses, like the amount of stress that must just take on a person's body, like it has to be awful. And you can empathize with the position she's in, and I do. Like I look at it, but you also have to know, like, after everything we know, all of it was avoidable, and all of it can be fixed by just doing some basic things like getting a job. Do I have hope? Not much, but like I don't hate Megan in the sense that I wish any ill upon her. I just want to see an end to all of this, and she's just not on the right track yet. She's just not.
Anything else from you, Sandra?
The only thing that, just like everyone said, if she would change and put her good tactics to work, everything would be so much better for her. But I don't see her doing that at all. She's going to continue the same path she's been on these last few years. Nothing's going to change for her.
Well, unfortunately, I think you're right. But, well, thank you guys so much for doing this. Again, like, this is going to be the last episode of the Megan season for now, until there's a big update. I have big other stories. Like one of the biggest gifts I've been given like since doing this podcast is people have sent me a bunch of other stories of people similar. And I just think that there's like a really interesting niche here with, people who brazenly commit acts of fraud, but it's not big enough to, really spur national outrage or something like that. And I think it's a really interesting thing to cover, and I'm really excited to bring you guys those stories. So thank you guys for listening. Those are going to be coming soon. But for now, I'm Amanda. This is Don't Waste This Effing Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner, season 1. And this was Justin, Sandra, Chloe, and Alex.